Hey guys, it is Roxanne Foster. I am the mom of the Foster's 5. Welcome. I hope you're excited to learn how to make a trip itinerary, a travel itinerary, and that you'll be able to follow along. I am the one who does all of the planning for our trips. And I've spent a lot of years researching how to get the most time out of our trip, how to maximize the time that we have to be on a vacation, figuring out local spots, not doing just the touristy things. Although I feel like tourists get a really bad rap sometimes because the fact is, some of the things that are very touristy to do are some of the most fun things to do when you visit a new place. So I've just learned a lot of ways to build a trip itinerary that I think are really beneficial to others who maybe don't quite know how to get started. I think that's what I hear the most from some of my friends is like, I don't really know what to do. And so we get there and we wing it and we miss some things or, we just waste some time trying to figure out what to do next. And I'm a big believer in planning being just the best thing you can do before you take a trip like this, because then you're not wasting any of that precious time on the trip. And to me, when you've planned a vacation, and you've spent a lot of money to get there, to stay in your hotel room, XYZ, it's just really frustrating to feel like you've wasted any amount of time because that time is literally money in these situations. So we're gonna just jump right into how I build a travel itinerary. I have a great blog post up about this if you would rather read through what I'm saying. Be sure to follow along on here and let us know if you have any questions about how I do this. And I'm happy to help. It's just one of my favorite things to do is to plan vacations. If you're here, you've hopefully booked a vacation and you're trying to figure out what you want to do on it, what you want to do next, and how to really build a good itinerary. So for this, I've decided to use our Chicago trip that we planned. I say last minute, it's May. So what's that? June, July, August, 3 months away. Lots of people probably plan a trip in 3 months' time. I usually have most of our trips planned out for a full year. So this was a very last minute trip for me. And so I just created our travel itinerary for that Chicago trip. So I'm going to use that as an example as I go through this. We are going on a Saturday, coming back on a Wednesday. For Oklahoma City, that's one of the nonstop flight places options that we have. It's like an hour-and-a-half flight. We'll get there. We have most of the day Saturday, all day Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then most of the day Wednesday. So it's a good trip for what we're doing. And this is our first big city to tackle with our little kids. Our kids are 6, 4, and 2. The most important thing about a trip, obviously, is choosing where you're going. So sometimes that in and of itself is the hardest part. I tend to just choose somewhere I want to go. I know that sounds really simple, but I have a bucket list of places we want to go. And if I notice that flights are cheaper, but sometimes that's the hardest part is choosing where you want to go. I don't talk about this a lot on the blog post, but things to consider with that is how much time do you have to explore the place? If you've only got 5 days to make a trip happen, then choosing somewhere like Paris, where you've always wanted to go, is probably not the best bet. Paris is obviously going to have a lot of travel time involved getting there, and you don't want to waste 2 of your 5 days on travel, plus any kind of time change. That's just something to consider. You'll be able to narrow down your choices of where you want to go when you kind of break down how long do you have, what's your budget. If you've only got $2,000 to make a 5-day trip happen, then Paris is very likely out of the question. But something like Chicago, I believe this trip to Chicago is absolutely going to cost less than $2,000 for us, but it's partly because we fly for free on our Southwest card. Chicago would be a totally doable trip with a $2,000 budget. So picking where you're going is obviously the first step. Building the itinerary, we assume you've already chosen that, so I'm just going to jump right in. The first thing that I like to do is to have all of my important details in one place. Which airport are we flying into? What hotel are we staying in? Do I have travel insurance? What's the information on that? How am I getting from the airport to our hotel? How are we getting around the city? Are there any big major tickets that we have purchased that we have in advance? I put all of that in one place. I tend to take either a folder, that's how I used to do it back in the day, or nowadays everything is saved on my phone. And so I save all of those things in one place where it's easy to find. So you're going to want to have all of your important details figured out ahead of time. So for this trip, something that I have written in the blog post is that we've decided we're going to use the Chicago metro system to get around. You can do that from the airport even. The subway goes out to the airport. Sometimes that can be really inconvenient, but for Chicago, it's about a 35 to 45 minute train subway ride into town to our hotel. And an Uber is only about 30 minutes. So it's really not that big of a time difference. Sometimes if, public transportation is going to take an hour and an Uber is 15 minutes, that might be worth the cost difference. But for us on this trip, the kids are going to be so excited to use the subway. So we're buying the unlimited 7-day passes for that. We're only going 4 days, but they have a 3, a 5-day, and a 7-day, or maybe it was only a 4-day and a 7-day option. I can't quite remember, but we're going with the 7-day. And then just a little extra thing when we have things like that, where we have extra days left over when we go home, we always just try to find someone in the airport to give our unlimited days to, that it'll hopefully benefit and be a gift to someone. So like I said, I like to have my hotel address figured out. I map everything, and I'll talk about that more in just a minute. And so it's really important for me to have the hotel address like at the top of my list of all of my things. So step number 2 that I talk about on the blog is to brain dump. I'm sure you do this in other parts of your life. For a trip, what that looks like for me is I go through and choose everything we could possibly want to do on this trip. Sky's the limit on this one. So it's very unrealistic. We are very likely not going to do all of these things, but I start with a huge brain dump. So something that I like to use, it's just good old-fashioned Google. So I'm going to pull that up really quickly and go to Google. So I tend to Google things to do in Chicago. And Google is really great about having a top things to do in XYZ city just right at the top of the screen whenever you click on it. So I go to the more things to do, and I do just a really quick scan over all of the top things that are listed. As you travel a little bit more, or maybe you already will know this, you'll know your family's style and you'll know what things you like to do. So it's easy to go through this long list and choose the things that will fit your family. So for example, on this list, top of the list is Millennium Park. Yes, that's going on my list. Willis Tower. Yes. Navy Pier. Cloud Gate, or the Bean. I didn't know that the Bean was called Cloud Gate for a long time. The Art Institute of Chicago. My kids are a little too small to really, truly enjoy this. And so we'll probably skip that this time, but I do happen to already know that they have a free learning center, and we'll probably go to that. So adding that to my list. John Hancock Center, Shedd Aquarium. Like I said, I like to just go through this list of things to do and just make an all-encompassing list of all of the options, and then I'll narrow it down later. Something else that I really love to Google is things to do in Chicago with kids. That's becoming a much more popular searched item. And one of my, so right now you can see that here's somebody else's blog post, 24 fun and exciting things to do in Chicago with kids. I'll tend to just kind of skim through those. A lot of those are going to be repeated things. But this Curbed Chicago is a website that I've found that I really love, the kid itineraries that they put together for different cities. So I will also always go through their list and figure out what places I want to pull from there. They tend to have a little bit more obscure places, which we really like to do things like that when we're on a trip. So I'll skim through their list and pick a few things like, look at this Chicago Botanical Garden. Doesn't that look so beautiful? A lot of these will be duplicated, but some of them might be new. So I also go through this list and just pick a couple things that I might want to do. The 606 Trail, that was not on my other list. So I'm going to grab that and add it to my list. Okay. So once you have done a brain dump and you've just put all the possibilities on there, we will go back through these in just a second. But this is step number 2, very important step. Don't skip this one. This is where you might spend a little bit more of your time researching all of the opportunities to do in that city. So on step 3, I say to price it out and make a list of all of the times that these places are open. This is really important because I have gone on trips prior to being really great at planning things and really wanted to do an activity and didn't realize it was closed on the day that I put it on our itinerary. And that's normally not a big deal. I've learned to be really flexible. We can move that around, but sometimes that could really mess up your whole trip. Maybe you put it on the last day of your trip only to find out it was canceled. I mean, that just really, it would be a huge bummer. So this step is so important. Price it out and check the times. On the price it out, this is where I always go and search for a city pass. So the city pass is, I haven't done a lot of research on how they have actually put this together, but most of the major cities in America have joined this project, and they've taken all of the top tourist attractions and discounted the price for all of them for you to purchase the city pass. So I know that part of the way they're able to do that is that they bank on the fact that you're going to buy the city pass and then not go to all of the places. But my family always goes to all of the places that we are able to go on this pass. So for Chicago on this trip, I wrote a little bit in the blog post about how the city pass doesn't actually work out for us this time. It almost always saves us money. But for this trip in particular, a lot of the places that we're planning to go, we already get in free with our science museum in Oklahoma, the reciprocal program that they have with science museums all across the state or the United States. So this is something that not a lot of people realize. Your children's museums, your science museums, your botanical gardens, any of those local places that you have a membership to, you want to check the details on. So our science museum pass actually is going to get us free into the Museum of Science and Industry, the Alder Planetarium, and the Field Museum. So those three things are on the city pass at a great discount, but we're already going to get into those places free with our science museum pass. And so once I did the math and broke down, this is how much it'll cost for each of these places, we would be spending a little bit more if we purchased the city pass. So we're not doing that this time, but I definitely wanted to give a plug for it because it has saved us tons of money in the past. So on the price it out, you're going to go to each website. You're going to check what the tickets cost. A lot of times there's a discount for purchasing tickets in advance. A lot of places have a discounted day. So they might have normal prices all week long, but on Thursdays, it's cheaper to get into. So those notes are so important to place in your planning sheets because you're going to want to put that place with the discounted price on that day of your itinerary. Sometimes it's easy to know already, I'm going to go to this place on this day because I get in cheaper. So price it out and check the times. We made a big dream and we need to figure out if we can do it all. So I use the city pass to figure out how much it's going to cost. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to the Chicago City Pass website so you can see what I'm talking about. So see, this City Pass admission gets you into the Shed Aquarium. Kind of a huge bonus is that it's a priority entry. So you're going to skip lines with it. The Sky Deck Chicago day and night admission. So when you're pricing this out, make sure you're comparing apples to apples. For us, this time we weren't going to do the day and night admission, so we just priced out going once. The Field Museum, all access pass, Alder Planetarium, or the Art Institute. So for our family, we would have picked the Alder Planetarium. The Museum of Science and Industry, plus one ticketed experience, or the 360 Chicago Observation Deck. So like I said, this is just a great deal. I know for a fact the Shed Aquarium is about $60 to $65 per adult, and an adult city pass is only $108. So right there, you already know you're getting into these other places for a really steep discount. So like I said, I've already done the math on this one. This time it doesn't work out for us, but it usually does. Pay attention to the discounted days. You also want, when you're going to a new city, to check and see if there are any specific activities that might be going on in the actual time frame you're going. Lots of times there are different festivals, there are different concerts, different like experience days that go on. So usually just a quick Google search of, things going on in Chicago in August will pull up several of those things for me. We're just barely missing a jazz festival, which would have been so much fun. But sometimes that's something really important to look for, or that's always something really important to look for. Okay, so now that we've priced everything out, I'm gonna go back through my list and check the costs of how much each of those things are going to be for me. So on this trip, we're doing the Willis Tower Sky Deck, and I've priced out what that's gonna be. Luckily for us, Declan is free and a lot of the things that we're doing. We're gonna soak that up every minute while we can since there's 5 of us. The Shed Aquarium, it's $40 adults, so I was off on that one, so sorry. And $30 for children. The Navy Pier, it's actually free to go to the Navy Pier. There's a lot of things on the Navy Pier. It's definitely worth going to. But things like the Sky Wheel, the carousel that's there, the rides, those all cost. I know for this trip, we're going to get the day pass for all of those things, which is going to be a little pricier than things we would normally do. But a lot of the things we're doing on this trip are cheap. The Chicago Shakespeare Theater is something I had written down to check. The Chicago Children's Museum. So the Shakespeare Theater, I went ahead and checked to see what they were doing when we were there, and they're performing The Wizard of Oz, which for us was so exciting because our kids are really into that right now. So that's something we've added to our list that we're absolutely going to do. The Chicago Children's Museum, this one I actually learned as I was planning this that I don't get in free with my Science Museum pass. But in Tulsa, there's a Tulsa Children's Museum, and purchasing that membership gives me 50% off to the Children's Museum in Chicago and a whole slew of other children's museums that we already plan to go to this summer. So once I did the math on that, I'm purchasing the Tulsa Children's Museum pass. And added bonus, we go to Tulsa a lot to see my family, so we'll get in there for free now too. Lots of different things to consider to save some cash on these trips. So I've separated out my list for things that cost money and things that are completely free. So we've made our list of the time. I didn't write down the time frames on this blog post just because it was going to take up a lot of space, but that's something I always do. Check to see if anything's closed on certain days, etc. On the Shakespeare Theater, we definitely decided we wanted to go see Wizard of Oz, and it's only playing while we're there for this trip on Sunday and I think Wednesday. And so that's one of those things that we will absolutely have to do on one of those days, which will help us build our itinerary at the end. So step 4 is choose any must-do places to eat. I know a lot of people don't think a whole lot about where they're going to eat on vacation, but I do. I love food. I love experiencing new things on trips. I love eating at local restaurants. So I spend quite a bit of time researching where we're going to eat on this trip. Not everybody has to be as ridiculously planned as I am, but I promise you it has made our trip so much more enjoyable knowing this is where we're going to go eat. So I like to use Yelp and Zomato, which I think has been renamed to, or maybe it used to be Urban Spoon, and now it's Zomato. So I will go into both of these places and put in the city I'm going to and just do a quick search. I know that my kids aren't going to do super great at really, really fancy restaurants, but they are really well behaved at nicer places. And so we will usually pick at least one higher level place to visit on any trip that we take. But I also tend to go into Yelp and search pizza. So what are the top pizza places in Chicago? And I'll go through here. So Lou Malnati's, Peckwaits, I suppose is how you say it. Giordano's, it's one of our favorite places. So I'll go through and pick 2 or 3 of these pizza locations because I know my kids love pizza, and then I'll narrow that down based on what I see on their website or costs or if it's out of the way or not. So the things that I always search, which I'm giggling because every family is going to be different, is we do pizza on every trip, burgers on every trip. It's just a guaranteed my kids are going to eat that meal and not fight with us. So I go through and I'll pick small cheval, cheval, the butcher, and the burger. And I'll just kind of go through their menus to choose what I want. I also search coffee because, hello, we have 3 young children and we are go on vacation. We need to be caffeinated. So I'll search for the highest rated coffee shops. I also tend to search for desserts. We like to make sure we have a special treat every day when we travel. Calories don't count on vacation, in case you didn't know. On my last trip to Chicago, I tried the Mindy's hot chocolate and it was superb. $8 for a cup of hot chocolate, but I promise it was well worth it. Sweet Mandy B's, that would probably go on my list to try this time as well. So burger, coffees, sandwich shop, desserts, and then just going through the top lists. I will often cross-reference with Zomato. Yelp is kind of my go-to website to use, but I always cross-reference with Zomato and Google. Just a quick best places to eat in Chicago. So choose any must-do places to eat. On the blog, I go through what my favorite websites are to use, how we choose these things, and just little tips I have. So a big tip I have for eating on vacation is we almost always fly Southwest, which means we get 2 checked bags per person for free. And since there's 5 of us, that's a lot of luggage. We don't ever use all of that space, but I will always pack 1 suitcase full of snacks. Okay, my kids are little and snacks are often the way that we get through a day. So veggie straws, Cheez-Its, applesauce, just a lot. I'll go to Aldi before the trip, spend $25 and just have a suitcase full of food. If the hotel we're staying at doesn't have free breakfast, which I almost always try to snack one that does, if it doesn't, I'll usually also pack 2 boxes of cereal, plastic spoons, paper bowls, and then just run to a local convenience store or a grocery store when we get there and grab milk and some fruit to fill in what we've got. So it's just a great way to save money when you're traveling. If you aren't flying somewhere like Southwest where you get free luggage, still make a stop at the local grocery store, pick up some apples, bananas, just anything that you might think your kids would benefit from. Granola bars, Nutri-Grain bars. We pack a whole suitcase full of food. Step 4 is group activities together by location. I feel really strongly that this is a step that nobody does. That helps so much. So what I always do is I'll just run a Google search, put each place we've chosen that we're going to in, and get a visualization of where these things are in the city. So when I'm going to go ahead and do that with a couple places. So we are staying at the Hotel Felix when we go. We got a great deal on it. So I will go into Google, do directions for Hotel Felix, and I'm only going to pick a couple that I know are in different places so that you can understand exactly what I'm saying. Okay, so from Hotel Felix, I know that we are absolutely going to do the Alder Planetarium. Stick that one in. I know that we're going to do Millennium Park. We're going to do Navy Pier, the Chicago Children's Museum, the Shedd Aquarium, and the Willis Tower. I'm also going to throw in, I already know that I have taken this one off of our list, but I'm going to go ahead and add in the 606 Trail so you can see why I took it off our list. Okay, so I've gone in and I've added all of these places that I absolutely know that we are going to make happen on this trip. So we're going to give the computer just a second to catch up with what I'm thinking. Okay, so when you do this, you're able to easily and quickly visualize what things are by each other. So for example, the Navy Pier is obviously right here. And I know that the Children's Museum is also right here. Millennium Park is right here. And I know that Cloud Gate is right here. The Shedd Aquarium is right next to the Alder Planetarium. Willis Tower is a little bit off on its own. Hotel Felix, it seems like it's a little bit off on its own, but it's really right on a subway line. I intentionally planned a hotel right on the subway line, and it's close to some of the restaurants we want to go to as well. So this is such a great way to go ahead and get in there, really get a feel for where things are in the city and group like things together. So I'll be able to make my list, put all of these things together. And then I'm just going to give you the example and show exactly how far out the 606 trail is. So from the last place we put, which is Willis Tower, it's an hour and 14 minutes. That might be the whole trip actually. But nevertheless, when I tried to map from Hotel Felix to the 606, the subway ride was going to be, I believe, either an hour or an hour and a half. And really, while the 606 trail looks so cool, that is not feasible with young children. And so we've just crossed that from our list this time. It was not worth a 3-hour round trip to go visit. So then once I've mapped where everything is, I'm able to go in on my planning list and place everything together. So I know that the Ryan Learning Center inside the Art Institute is right by Cloud Gate, which is in Millennium Park. It's right by the Crown Fountain and Buckingham Fountain in Grant Park and the Maggie Daley Park. So I go through and I place and group everything together. And so why I do that is that as I'm planning, I will try to visit all of those places on the same day. So it makes a lot of sense that we're not wasting any time going from South to Chicago to North Chicago to West Chicago. You can spend a lot of time trying to get from one place to another, or you can maximize your time and be super efficient and visit those places on the same day so that you're not wasting time traveling. Also, that obviously helps to not have grumpy kids, and it just really makes for a smoother trip. So, group activities together by location. When I do this step is also when I personally go through and check to see if the restaurants that I want to go to are by those things as well. So then I'm able to actually go through and say, okay, we're going to go from our hotel room to the Shedd Aquarium. We're going to spend all morning there. We're going to stop and have lunch at this place right next door. And then we're going to pop over to the Alder Planetarium. And so then I know I've planned my whole day. From there, we can decide if we want to go to one of the restaurants that maybe is kind of out on its own before heading back to our hotel. And there you go. We've made a really efficient, great plan for the day. Step number 6 is puzzle it all together. So now you've got so much information at your fingertips. This is probably more planning than you've ever done. And I promise you it's going to pay off and make for a fantastic trip. So puzzling it all together means now it's time to take these places that we know are by each other and any specific days that we figured out we have to visit a certain place and just build our itinerary. That's where the obvious work comes into play. Things like we know that the Wizard of Oz is only showing on Sunday and Wednesday. And so we're going to place that first. We're going to choose which day, or we're going to put it on both days with a question mark. And as we build the rest of our days, be able to solidify which day we're going to it. This step obviously is the most crucial step, but even if you didn't actually finish puzzling it together and you just have all this information that you gathered, I promise this is going to pay off for such a fantastic trip. This is my favorite part. This is when I get a good old-fashioned piece of paper, pen, pencil, and just start kind of puzzling in. I've got Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I like to go through and, for example, our flight on Wednesday leaves at 5:30 p.m. I want to be heading towards the airport by 2 o'clock. It's a little bit earlier than I normally would, but with all the kids and the fact that we're using public transportation, I want to allow for anything that could possibly go wrong. So I'll build my itinerary that day based on needing to be heading towards the airport by 2 o'clock. I personally, once I've puzzled together all of my days and scheduled out my days, I like to go in and do a real quick, okay, hotel to the first place we're going. How are we getting there? And I'll just make a quick note. We want the red line. We're going to get on at this stop. I'll do it that day as well. I'll pull it up on my phone, but it helps me to have already put that somewhere in my brain that this is what we're doing. It just helps me feel more organized for the day. Okay, final tips. These are just little extra things that I'm going to throw out since they didn't really fit in the Chicago trip. My favorite way to explore a new city is either a bicycle tour or a food tour. Yes, it's touristy, but I promise they're so much fun. My favorite food tour I ever did was in New York. We just had such a good time. We found some of our favorite restaurants, and I always love to put that right at the beginning of our trip. It gives me a really good feel for the city. And it gives me places that I want to go visit again while I'm there. Another important tip is don't try to sit down and build this whole itinerary all at one time. It will really overwhelm you. And when we get overwhelmed, we just give up. So try to break this down into the steps. Do little bite-sized pieces at a time. If you're having a great time, cool. Go through, do a couple more steps, absolutely. But break it down piece by piece. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Just sit down and do whatever you're comfortable figuring out that day. And I promise the more time you spend exploring and learning about this city, the better prepared you'll feel for that trip. Let's see. I also want to add that trying to do too much is definitely a bad plan. To some people, this probably looks like I'm trying to cram way too much into the trip, and that might be true, but I know our travel style. We are go, go, go people. We sleep in, we get up when we're ready, unless there's a specific time we're trying to get somewhere, but we always scramble out into our day. We feel like our trips are just such a great time to be alive. We want to go explore. We want to be in the city. We want to feel the vibrant energy that the city gives off. And so we make a really great detailed schedule, but I promise we've learned to be flexible with this. The point of having these detailed trips is to be able to be flexible. If we wake up one morning and decide, oh man, we just don't feel like going and doing that today, cool. We'll switch something around on another day if we can. Maybe we'll scratch it entirely. If we show up and it's crazy packed and we just don't want to deal with that mess today, no big deal. Because I've done so much research, I usually have a few backup things on hand that we can go and do. There's always space to pivot whenever you make plans like this. And doing this planning is what makes you feel more comfortable and more educated and able to make those decisions on a dime. I also feel like this planning helps us to be prepared to give us time to research these things so that we can teach our kids about them too. You know, we've already watched a couple videos about being on a subway. We've talked a lot about staying right by us when we're in those situations and needing to get on the subway. It just gives us more time to feel like we've prepared everyone for the trip really well. If all of this sounds really, really overwhelming, not just take it one bite at a time, but like, oh, Roxanne, this is not something I can do. Well, then hire me. Let me do this for you. This is my favorite thing to do. I love planning. I love making a trip itinerary. And I just really fully believe that having a really good plan is what maximizes the time, gives you more space for family memories, allows everyone to feel more calm and comfortable, which keeps everyone in a positive, happy mood, and just really makes the trip over the top special. So if you need a little bit of help with that, hire me. For an hour, it's just $50. And if you already know where you're going, I promise you in that hour, we are gonna bust out the best trip ever. I am quick and efficient. I know what I'm talking about. Or if this is just too overwhelming, you don't even know where to start, you don't know where you wanna go, I have other packages where I'll plan the whole thing for you. I'll make all your dinner reservations, all of your excursions, buy all of your tickets in advance, and stay within your budget. I promise I also will save you money in the process. I know you're spending money on me, but I know how to find good deals. So this is how I plan a trip. This is how I build a travel itinerary. You don't have to do it like me. I'm not saying my way is perfect, but it is such a great place to start to make your trip just fantastic, over the top special. That's it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Send me an email, however you want to get a hold of me. I would love to answer your questions about travel. Bye guys.